Welcome back to our monthly mastermind. Today's going to be a good one. John Gualtieri, my business partner, and I are going to talk about sales skills. Boring, right? We all talk about lead generation, but we fail to talk about lead conversion. And it all starts with building trust and having conversations and asking the right questions with new clients because we are taught to tell, tell, tell. And when we tell, 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 we don't build connections. So today, John Gualtieri is going to talk about for the next hour how to build trust with a client. And I hope you enjoy today's mastermind.
Guys, I've been doing this a long, long time, and I had a coach for many years. But back in the day, there were no such thing as real estate coaches. What I had was a sales coach. And my coach, and he's still my coach today, Dan Caramanico, is a heavy, heavy hitter. And so I learned a lot from Dan over the years. And what we're going to share with you all today is very counterintuitive because this industry is absolutely an avalanche of scripts and dialogues. Now, I'm not saying scripts and dialogues don't have their place. What I am saying is they run a distant second to asking the right questions in the right order at the right time. Okay. So here's the three basic principles, guys. I just said one, scripts and dialogues have their place, but they by no means are the same thing we're going to share with you today. I wish this industry and the sales industry, for that matter, would teach what I'm teaching because you guys would be far more effective out there. And guys, that was not a statement of self-aggrandizement. Will, I see you on the video again. This is not a statement of self-aggrandizement, but rather, I put in the time and the energy and the effort to learn this stuff. Now, the second principle here is oftentimes when I ask an agent, right, I ask an agent, okay, so you get on the phone with a lead or a prospect, what is your goal? And invariably, the answer that I get is my goal is to get an appointment, to get an appointment. And that is not your goal. Okay. Your goal on that call is to create trust. And the appointment will come as a natural extension of creating trust. I saw a social media post that Will did, I don't know, last week or something, and he talked about being attached to outcomes. And guys, there's no way whatsoever that if our goal, our outcome is to get an appointment, that we can be prospect focused. There's no way. There's no way we can create trust. All we're trying to do is arrange the game board so that we get an appointment. So again, our goal is to create trust. And how do we do that? Well, this is the third principle, right? Leads and prospects. I got disconnected there, Will.
No,
Leads
I
and
just made you a panelist.
yeah, there we go. I'm not there. I am. Okay,
Now you're on.
there's my pretty face. Will being right next to me. I'm sorry, but it's just like it's just like Beauty and the Beast. I'm just saying. So
Much better now.
so anyway, I love you, Will. So anyway, guys, what I was saying was, the third principle here is that prospects and leads will know far more from the questions we ask about whether or not they can trust us than by anything that we can tell them. Now, look, here's something in our defense. From the time that we're in grade school, it starts in first grade, we are rewarded for telling people stuff. So teacher says, Sally, what's 1 + 1? Oh, teacher, it's 2. Great, Sally. Here's a gold star to take home to your mama. Right. And then Will's in the fifth grade and he does a book report on Uganda. And the teacher says after Will's book report, Will, amazing. You really educated us. You told us so much. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you did all of that educational stuff by sharing all of these facts with us. Will, here's 3 gold stars to take home to your mama. And on it goes. Our entire educational system is basically set up for telling, telling, telling. And we get that in life too. So at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult to switch modes from telling to asking. I'm going to share a quick story with you. I always tell stories because I know you guys are fascinated by my stories. But at the end of the day, really, it's because it helps us remember things. But I was over at my father-in-law's house, who is a retired chemical engineer. He had his house for sale. Chemical engineer, you know, the personality type, detail, detail, detail. Well, he had his home for sale, and he had had a home inspection, and the agent who had the listing, and thank God I didn't refer her to him, there was a stucco problem, and she called while I happened to be there, and he put her on speaker. And she didn't ask one question. I mean, she just basically threw up on this guy. And I could tell by his body language that he was starting to have a meltdown. Not a single question. What was the outcome she was focused on to get him to agree to spend whatever money necessary to address that problem? I mean, honestly, I was dizzy. She didn't come up for air. That's no way to create trust. So we go, there's that saying, fools run where an angel fears to follow, right? That's true. And so we go moving ahead without knowing what's behind the curtain, telling, telling, telling. So here's another great story, and this one is hard to believe, but there's no hair on it. It's absolutely true. So back when I was selling real estate full time, I had gotten a call from another agent in an adjacent marketplace, and his aunt and uncle had their home for sale with another agent, and that listing had expired. They couldn't sell their home. So he called me and said, "Hey, John, my aunt and uncle, da 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 da, would you be willing to list this for a referral fee?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Do you mind if I tag along? I think it'll make them feel better." Which, by the way, was the last time I ever let another agent tag along with me on a listing, because this guy gave the presentation, right? I'm sitting there thinking, like, what the hell am I doing here? Just get the paperwork signed and drop it off at my office. So in the middle of his presentation, the uncle turned to me and said, "John, what commission do you charge?" And Mr. Genius nephew is like, "Oh, well, bada bing, E-I-E-I-O, let's come back to that." And I'm sitting there, man, this is amateur hour. So I waited a minute and I interrupted him. I said, "Louis, I am so sorry to interrupt you, but your uncle asked a question about the commission a few minutes ago, and I don't believe we answered it." And I turned to the uncle and I said, "Could you share with me why you asked about our commission at this point in our meeting?" And he said, "I was hoping that if I paid you more, I could get the house sold faster." True story, right? And so, the commission issue is the biggie, Will. I think that you'll agree. What I think that we do is that we go into appointments with buyers and sellers, and our strategy around that issue is hope. Hope it doesn't come up, right? Here's what I will tell you. I didn't hope it would come up. What I did know was that I was massively prepared if it did. Massively prepared if it did. And so, many of us go in there, and if it doesn't come up, we get back in the car and we say a prayer of thanks. Thank God it didn't come up, right? But when it does come up, we're not ready. And I know this to be the truth. And Will and I have talked about this many times. Will, I'm sure you'll agree.
Oh, yeah. We assume, what about the fence, John? What about the guy that asked you about the fence?
Yeah,
Tell us that story.
yeah, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, but this is another true story. Client of mine in Wyoming, right? We'll call him Harry. So Harry and I had a coaching call. It was late on a Monday afternoon, and he was telling me all about this listing, and it was a luxury property. It was about 2 million bucks, and he met with the seller, and he said to me during our coaching call, "John, I got along so well with that seller that I would be shocked if I didn't get this listing." And I remember thinking at the time, man, this is the kiss of death, right? So I didn't say anything. I said, "Well, I'm sure that when you get the listing, Harry, you'll do a great job." So Tuesday afternoon, my phone rings and I happen to be in between calls and I see on the caller ID it's him. And I said, Yo, man, what's up? And he said, I can't believe it. I'm so upset I didn't get that listing. Now, keep in mind, this is a $60,000 commission, 60,000, 60, comma, 000, not 6,000. And I said, what happened? Right. And he said, well, he interviewed another agent and he had the seller had a deplorable fence in the backyard. It was wood with the galvanized wire on it and it was falling down and the wood was rotted and the galvanized, metal was rusting. And he asked me what he should do about it. And I told him he should put up a new fence. But the other agent told him just tear it down and throw it on a dumpster. And I said, okay. And so what did the seller say? And he said, Harry, look, I loved you. I loved our meeting, but you were asking me to spend 40 grand, right? And the other guy just said, throw it on a dumpster, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. But you guys were close, which is a nice way of saying, see ya. I love that one, sellers. It was a close call, right? But the other guy just edged you out. So I said, look, tell me exactly how that conversation about the fence went. He said to you, hey, Harry, what should I do about this fence? So my guy goes into a diatribe with this seller. Well, kids and pets and wild animals and EIEIO and liability, da 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 da. You need to tear it down and put up another one. And so he didn't ask a single question of that seller, not one. He rushed ahead without knowing what was behind the curtain. And we do that, guys, in an effort to aggrandize ourselves with our vast knowledge of real estate, right? And how the game works. And
I say it's when we put our Superman cape on.
Yeah, it's
or
to our
woman.
demise, Will, right? It's to our
Mm-hmm.
demise. So if he had just done one thing, asked one question, Harry, what do you think I should do about this fence? That's a great question, Jim. I get that all the time, when it comes to stuff like this. But before I weigh in, what do you think? And look, man, I don't want to spend money putting up a new fence. I just like I throw this stuff on the dumpster. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Boom, 60 grand.
Right.
One little misstep because he was telling people stuff, Will.
Oh, trust me, with my strong personality, until I ran into you in 2008, when I hired you to be my business coach back in the summer of '08, I used to be a great teller. And the problem is you have to ask questions. Speaking of questions, the most important questions that we can ask are those that deal with the emotional drivers behind why someone wants to buy or sell, AKA the pain. And these are the questions that create trust and connection. People know that we get them and their situation. So, John, what are the three basic principles behind questions?
So the first one is this, and I this is like another deadly mistake. So let's take a listing appointment, for example. Typically, when we interact, and when I say typically, like 99% of the time with someone about a listing appointment, it's usually a couple, and we only interact with one person on the phone. We've only interacted with one individual. And then we get to the listing appointment, and most of us, what we do is, people say, well, I do some rapport and I connect with people. Guys, rapport is not connecting with people. And so we tour the house and we have totally and utterly left the person out of the conversation with whom we hadn't spoken, whether it be him or her. Totally leave them out of the dialogue. And guess what? To our demise. And I will tell you this, the same thing happens with a buyer. We've only interacted with one buyer. We get all of this information. We want 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, da, 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 da. And then we meet with the buyer, maybe to show a property, and we totally leave the other individual out of the dialogue. This is a kiss of death, especially if it's the wife who has been left out of the dialogue.
And let me add to that, John. So I had a story recently that is exactly this. So I was on a listing appointment and the husband barely spoke. The wife called me. She found me on Google. She had me over. She asked all the questions. I walked through the house with her. And when we got to the evening where we were going to talk about pricing and the next steps, the husband, who is a banker, very, very quiet accountant type personality, and he was just sitting there. And I made a joke out of it. And I said, John, that was his name. I said, I know better than to just keep talking to Kathy. I know Kathy's the boss. I've been married 33 years. But before we go any further, I'd like to get some opinions out of you. I don't want to have you sit there like a quiet time bomb and then tell Kathy after I leave that you don't think that I'm a good fit for you. And I kind of made a joke out of it, and I brought him out of his shell. And I think that's very important, because we make the mistake of dealing with the strong personality. But oftentimes when we leave, the other person is going to feel like, well, you didn't bond with me at all. I think we need to talk to somebody else. And that's what happens a lot.
There's no doubt about it. And what we should be doing is a listing appointment, especially when we get there, of course, create a little rapport. And I used to say, look, guys, do you mind if we just sit down for 5 minutes before I tour your home so I can better get my brain around your situation and your goals? And then I had notes, right? I had notes from a meeting with him, let's say, and I would say, Mary, look, Tom and I talked, and I just wanted to go over this with you and make sure that, we're all on the same page. I can't tell you how many times that she wasn't on the same page as he was. Believe me, right? So we go touring the house and not knowing that, oh, we don't know what's behind the curtain, do we?
No.
It's the kiss of death. It really is it is such a rookie move.
We were buying a car in 1997 after Mary had Adam, our son. And I remember being in the Jeep dealership, and another John Durbin, he was a guy I went to high school with. And I, again, have the strong personality. And Mary's the quiet time bomb. She just sits there and kills the deal. So we're talking, and he's talking to me. And as I'm sitting there, he had already done the presumptive close by giving us the key fob. And he had asked Mary for her keys because she was in on the sale. He gave her the key fob. He put it on her key ring. So now she's sitting there with the key fob. So that's the presumptive close. He's like, oh, they're buying the car. She would have never let me put the key fob on. So as we're sitting there, and he's just talking at me, did not interact with her at all. And we're talking about financing. All of a sudden, I could see Mary out of the corner of my eye taking this key fob off of the key ring. And I'm like, oh boy, things are about to go south. So right. So just like the presumptive close putting it on, she had just bailed. She stood up, she put the key fob on the table, and she told me, she looked at me, didn't say a word to him. She goes, I'll be in the car.
There you go. It's interesting, and I wasn't going to go down this path, but I will share it real quickly. Will and I both began our careers at Century 21. Century 21, by the way, was the big dog in the block. They were the first disruptor of the mom and pops, and they were, of course, displaced by Remax, and so it goes. But Century 21 had hired a private marketing group to do a thorough study of the marketplace and the consumer. And what they found a lot of things, but what they found out was fascinating to me. Women are the decision makers when it comes to buying a house. Okay, we know that. But did you guys realize that, and I believe this is still true, women are the decision makers when it comes to what agent to choose to list the home. They might not say anything because guys are like big macho, I'm taking control here, but women make the decision on which agent to use. And at the end of the day, if we don't bring her into the conversation, or if we don't bring him into the conversation for that matter, it's not a good thing. So
bottom line is you have to involve everyone, and you have to know your audience. And because again, you could lose more than one transaction over the course of the year. If you're dealing with, I had one where the dad was single girl, single woman, she's a teacher, and the dad was overbearing. He was the one. But I know enough, a lot of guys would have just dealt with the dad and left the girl out. But then what happens is later on, she tells dad, you know what? I don't want to work with him. I don't think he understood me at all. Right. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to understand. So what's the next principle, John?
Yeah, so the next principle is understanding this, and this is really difficult. Okay. Very difficult part of the sales process. but it's imperative if we're going to create trust. And that is simply this: there's a massive difference between a prospect or a lead sharing information with us, right? Versus sharing their pain or sharing the emotional drivers behind why. So I want to tell another real world story. I was really struggling with this one, and my sales coach Dan, I would think that I had had a great conversation with somebody. I got off the phone, man. It's like, oh my gosh, I had an amazing conversation with them. And I'm going to follow up for Friday and go out on the listing appointment, da, 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 da. And I would call on Friday, Will, and guess what would happen? Take a shot.
I
Who
don't
is
know what
this?
happened.
Who is this? Please don't
Yeah.
call here again. I'm sorry, we went in another direction. Hey, we've already listed our house. We've already bought a house. I mean, I was getting smashed, really. And like, oh my gosh, I had this great conversation. So I called Dan and I said, look, man, I'm drowning here. This is what's happening. And he said, look, you're confusing information for connection. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. I don't even know what the hell that means. And he said, John, you got to get behind the emotional drivers. Somebody telling you they need 4 bedrooms is just a fact. That has nothing to do with connection. They're just telling you what they want. So, a light bulb went off about a week later. And here's how the story goes. I had this listing, and it was, I'll never forget, it was on 1423 Ludwell Avenue, Maple Glen, Pennsylvania. And I got that listing by the grace of God because it was somebody I knew. Okay. So I was still struggling then. So this woman called me who lived in Maple Glen, but she lived in a townhouse, right? And she called me and said, John, I'm calling about your listing on Ludwell Avenue. I said, oh, that's great. I said, what area do you live in? And she said, I live here in Maple Glen, information, right? I said, so whereabouts in Maple Glen? And she said, we're in the Yorkshire townhomes. And I knew those townhomes because I went to the builders, grand opening. And I said, okay, I said, I know those townhomes really well. They're really nice. Can you share with me why you want to move? Right? See, now we're starting to percolate. She said, well, my husband works from home. We need a bigger house. That's
Mm.
information. That's information. That's all it is. A week prior, I would have said, "Oh, God, Mary, that's understandable. How many bedrooms do you need? What about a basement?" I would have just totally glossed over that. And I said, Mary, I'm just curious. There's a little den off the master in your townhome. Is that where he's working from? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, why is that a problem? Nobody goes up to the master bedroom in the during the day. She said, are you kidding me, John? His crap is everywhere. In the den, on the floor, on my bed, in the closet. I cannot stand it anymore. Bingo. Right? Now we're there. Now we're there, right? And so the moral of that story is I sold that listing to her. I listed her house and I also sold that for commission checks because I learned the difference between information and the emotional drivers behind that information. So I just want to tell one more quick story. Oh, actually, I want to ask a question. Guy calls me from Northeast Philly about the same listing, I might add. And he said, I said, Vince, you live in Northeast Philly, which is very, very suburban like in its demeanor. And the only difference is you can see the Philadelphia skyline from there. And I said, Northeast Philly is a great area. He said, yeah, it's changing down here. My neighbor got robbed. Okay. My question is this, guys, if you want to put it in the chat. My neighbor got robbed. Information or emotional driver?
Emotional driver.
Actually, it's information because here's how
Oh,
that story ended. I said, Vince, I said, that's terrible. I said, was it on your street? He said, John, it was my next door neighbor. I said, holy smokes, it must have been during the day. He said it was in the middle of the night. There's a baby asleep in the second bedroom. Could you imagine what would happen if that baby had awakened? Could you imagine? And so I wanted to say, Vince, your wife must be really ready to move. I said, Vince, your wife. John, my wife wants to move yesterday. See that?
Hmm.
And it's a very look, Will's been in this business about as long as I have. And at the end of the day, it's not uncommon for Top Gun agents to miss this. And that's a trick question. My neighbor got robbed. Information. How he felt about it came out his pores when I started asking questions. Do you think there was connection made in that moment? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right. If he had spoken to another agent and said, "Well, how many bedrooms do you need?" And then had spoken to me, it's game over. Okay,
Hmm.
so guys, you cannot, under any and all circumstances, mistake information for connection. You cannot do it, because if you do, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars in commission checks. And so the question is, in any given year, because you're obsessed with scripts and dialogues, and you're not looking for the emotional drivers, and you're attached to an outcome of getting an appointment, you're attached to an outcome of a commission, you're not attached to the outcome of creating trust. How many commission checks is it okay to lose in a year? One, two, 10? How many?
Remember 2015, John, when I had the best year I ever had? And going into 2016, I ended up losing 66 listings in a
I
row. I remember
remember that
calling
was
you.
painful.
I would call you. I'd be like, dude, I don't even know what happened. And the problem is, I became in my own head. I became a whale in my own head, and I couldn't understand why everyone else didn't see that as well. And the problem is, all of the things that made me have my best year ever in 2015, where I doubled my income over 2014, was I asked questions. I made friends with them. It was about making a connection. And in 2016, all I did, I was taking orders. Like, I became like the suit Nazi. You want to work with me? And the problem is, people don't care, you know? And I ended up losing 6 listings in a row. And I remember telling you, wouldn't it be funny if I had my best year ever followed by going out of business? I mean, it was mind blowing, and it was a huge kick in the head for me
Well,
because I stopped asking questions.
well, look, I've been, in those moccasins too, which, I think that experience as a coach fundamentally matters. But, at the end of the day, Will, this is another principle that wasn't in the outline, and that is we must be brilliant on the basics. And the only way to be brilliant on the basics is to revisit them time and time and time again. Sharpen the
Hmm.
saw, sharpen the saw, keep it sharp, because what ends up happening is it's very, very easy to slide back. And and
100%.
and in this game, man, you're going to get injured if you're not brilliant on the basics. You will be injured. Look, guys, I have two coaches. Do you think that a coach is above having a coach? If a
No,
coach doesn't have a coach, put your hand on your wallet and run. You know?
most therapists have therapists.
Well, exactly the point. It's an interesting comparison, but yeah. So let me give you the third principle here, and that is,
So let's revisit real quick because we've been talking a lot. Number one was interacting with both parties. If there's more than one person, interact with both parties. Always find out who is privy to the decision, like who's involved in the decision as well, right? Because you can get kicked in the head that way as well. If you don't get all the decision makers in the room, then you don't know what you're dealing with. So number two is understanding there's enormous difference between information and pain. So you have to ask lots of questions. When someone says, I'd like to move, or if you say to them, where are you moving? And they're like, oh, we're going to sell our house because we're moving to South Carolina. And most agents stop right there. Okay, cool. They're moving to South Carolina. But then if you start asking questions about why they're moving to South Carolina, and you find out that the wife's mom, has cancer, and the reason they're moving there is because they want to get there as quickly as possible so that the kids and they can spend as much time with her as they can before she passes away, as opposed to just moving to South Carolina. Well, now you've identified that they want to get there as quickly as they possibly can. Now, not every situation is going to have that, but a house, I will say this, after all these years, when someone wants to sell a house, all that is a byproduct of a life change. People don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to sell my house. It's the roof over their head. They don't just say, I'm going to sell my house. You might sell a car, But even with cars, it's an emotional decision. Something has changed. But with our house especially, if someone says they're going to move, you have to find out the underlying motive. That's the thing that you have to focus on, and then just keep asking more and more questions. Forget about scripts. Just ask more, be smart, ask more questions about what they just answered. Why is that important? Why do you want to move to South Carolina? How quickly do you want to go there? Or maybe it's because the husband's going to be retiring and they really wanted to go to South Carolina. Well, then you start asking them to talk about South Carolina. What is it about that place that you like? And have them start talking about some of the wonderful things that they like there. And then say, well, if you just stay here, what's the end of the world? You might, why don't you just stay here? Why is it so important that you go there? So it's not always some like life-changing thing. Sometimes it's just because they really want to do it. But either way, you have to ask those questions.
Yeah, and Will, you reminded me of something that Brian Tracy shared with me, and that is to master what he called conversation extenders. So it's like, okay, could you tell me more about that? Well, when you say such and such, how do you mean? Well, could you just elaborate on that? I need to get my brain around it. And just,
Mm-hmm.
those conversation extenders, fundamentally, like people will pour out to you. And again, when you create
And
trust, it's game over, man. It
every
really.
one of these questions, when you give them a chance to answer it fully without interrupting them, and they get to control the talking, that is what builds connection.
All day long.
Number
So
three.
number three is the sales process, guys. And I'm just going to give it to you basically, but I want to share why you want to follow a sales process. So the first step in a sales process is to extend the conversation. See, here we go again, right? We go and tell, tell, tell. No, we extend the conversation by ask, ask, ask. And that's whether we're on the phone for the first time or in front of a buyer or a seller. Extend the conversation. Two is we want to find the emotional drivers behind why. Okay, why? Now, the bottom line is people say, well, I just want to cut to the chase. I just want to qualify them. They might not be qualified. Yeah, well, good luck having them tell you the truth if you don't find the emotional drivers. They'll lie. They will, right? They'll hold their cards close to the cuff. Conversely, if you create that connection, they're going to tell you the truth all day long. So
Here's an
you
example. Can I cut you off?
sure.
This happened to me. I had a wedding to go to, and like a lot of men, not all, but like some, I was not prepared. Like the day before the wedding, I'm trying to find something to wear, and I go into Brooks Brothers. This was a long, long time ago, and but I've always thought about this and how I responded to it. The guy came up to me and he says, "Can I help you?" And I just said, "No, I'm just looking," because even though I had to have a tie for the wedding, right? I said, I'm just looking because I didn't want him to bother me. But then he started asking questions. He's like, well, what really brings you in here? And then I started asking, and then he started making jokes about me going to the wedding and not being prepared. Within about 5 minutes, we were on the same page. And I realized I got to get something. And I opened that up to him. But at the beginning, it was just started off with, I'm just looking. But he asked the right questions. Like, you're not just looking. You seem like you're kind of disheveled. Why are you in here? And why are you focused on getting a tie? And he just started asking the right questions. And he brought it out of me that I had a wedding tomorrow and I had nothing to wear. So that's just something as basic as that.
Well, and Will bought 6 ties that night, he told me.
I didn't None of which I wear anymore.
But guys, here's the sales process. Okay. You extend the conversation by asking questions. You find the emotional drivers, number two. Number three is now we can qualify people, right? As to their DNA, desire, need, ability. And then we talk about what I call an upfront contract. What happens next and when? Okay.
This is a biggie.
You're not going to get to qualify people or get a good upfront contract until you find pain and make a connection. And pain could be a good thing, by the way. So I just want to transition, Will, into Roman numeral number three really quickly. You know, when we ask questions, Will, who's in control of the conversation, us or the other guy?
Us.
It's us all day long, right? We spend so much time in this game explaining and educating and so forth and so on that we don't shut up. I shared on a Power Shots video a couple of weeks ago that when I was a kid, we used to go to the Jersey Shore from Philadelphia. That was everybody's vacation spot, Ocean City, New Jersey. And I used to read comic books along the way. And there was this comic book called Richie Rich. It was about this rich kid, right? And his dad was Daddy Warbucks. And Daddy Warbucks was going to get this robot made not too far from reality now, right? And the salesperson came in to sell Daddy Warbucks this made. The salesperson's name in the comic book was Mr. Yakety Yak.
Right.
Think about
Mr.
it.
Yakety Yak. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so you cannot find out what's behind the curtain unless you're asking questions. So, practical applications, all right? We need what I call defaults, okay? And if we have time, we'll do some role playing. But let me share with you how I handled the commission issue. And these defaults immediately take control of the conversation. So, John, listen, how much commission do you charge? Or, John, we want you to lower your commission. Or, John, we talked to another agent, he's charging 4%. You guys, the commission issue comes up in many, many ways. And by the way, if Will or I find out that you're negotiating commissions via text or email, we're going to drive to your marketplace so we have plenty of time to think about whether this is going to be a felony or life imprisonment. So anyway, uh, a seller would say some form of, will you reduce your commission? My default to take immediate control of the conversation was, look, Will, as you might imagine, I get that question all the time, but can I ask you? You have a question first. Well, what's that? Have you decided you're going to go with the agent with the lowest commission? Right? And there's only three answers: yes, no. Well, not necessarily, and it's almost always necessarily. But see, now we're in business because of that default. We're not stuttering, stammering, tripping over ourselves. We have this anxiety. Our blood pressure goes up. We get this gnawing lump of anxiety in the pit of our solar plexus. One move. Well, I get that question all the time. Can I ask you a question before I answer it? What's that? Have you decided you're going to hire the agent with the lowest commission? See, peeking behind the curtain. Not necessarily. Conversation extender. Okay, well, fair enough. And please, I just want to get my brain around this. When you say not necessarily, how do you mean exactly? See, you just keep drawing people out. I'm in control. Dan used to tell me, my coach, he said, John, you got to get so good at this stuff that you see a flashing neon light on the person's head that says, I'm in control, and you don't even know it. Right?
Right.
That's how good you want to be. Right? So that's the commission issue, uncovering motivation. I can tell you a gazillion stories of clients who had no idea about the motivation of someone, and they got killed. Killed. I remember not last year, a client called me. He brought a full price cash offer to a seller, and the seller wouldn't accept it. Settlement date, no contingencies. Why didn't he accept it? I don't know. Well, where's he moving to? Somewhere in North Jersey. Well, has he found a house? Not sure. I'm like, you should know
Right.
better, dude. Right? You should know better. At any rate, to open up the motivation dialogue. Will, I'm just curious if you could pick the perfect date to have your home sold, or if you could pick the perfect date to buy a home, what would that date be? Well, July 31st. So tell me why that's important. Or I love this one, right? We're not in any hurry. So, Will, when you say you're not in any hurry, how do you mean? Well, da 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 da. You don't have to be the perfect house. Okay, so let's pretend the perfect house came up tomorrow. I guess you couldn't buy it, right? You guys, questions, questions, questions. Find out what's behind the curtain. Push back when it comes to pricing. Okay, well, in the first place, guys, we shouldn't get ourselves there to begin with. We should know when we have that first conversation what the seller thinks his or her home is worth, right? So we should be asking that then. Hey, Will, I'm just curious. You must have an idea what you'd like to, like what price you'd like to see. I don't want to walk into an ambush, right? But
Right.
what's the question that we ask? Will, Mary, when we get to the pricing part of our listing appointment, could you share with me, do you know how bank appraisers go about the process of determining value on any given home? Have you been like educated in that wheelhouse? Most of the time, no. See, and then we can share information, right? Then we can share information. But I want to know what's behind that curtain because most of the time they don't know you know what from Shinola when it comes to that wheelhouse. You get pushback like that. So it's about asking questions, okay? When the buyer or seller asks a question like our buddy in Wyoming, you never answer it. Hey, Will, that's a great question. I'm just curious. What are you thinking? Should I rip up the carpet in this bedroom? You know, what are you thinking, Will? Right? I don't want to do that. Are you kidding me? Da, 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 da. And guys, here's the other mistake that we make. When we tour a home, we'd make a checklist. You should change this. You should change that. You should save that for after the listing contract being signed for crying out loud.
Let me tell you how I screwed one up. I walk into this lime green room and the wife says, should we paint this room? And I said, yeah, I would. Oh, my son chose this color. So now she just thinks I'm a jerk. All because I didn't say, why do you ask? Why do you ask? What's so important about you asking me this question? Do you like the color? I mean, why did you paint it lime green in the first place?
But they should probably change it. But again, to find out what they're thinking. Like, I really want to change it. Okay, well, then you can deal with it then. Okay, well, you know what? You probably should. And this was one of my favorite questions. Mary, I'm just curious, would you do that work yourself or would you hire somebody? Great question, right? It's a great question.
Even if they are thinking that they would change the color, if what a lot of real estate agents do, and I've done it myself, is they want to put their Superman cape on and be an authority so that they are taken more seriously because it strokes their own ego. So when someone says, what do you think of these curtains? Or what do you think of the paint color in this room? Even if you just completely dismiss it and say, God, I'd get rid of it, or anything that could be negative, then even if they agree with you, you've hurt their feelings and they think that you have no compassion or empathy. That's the problem.
Plus they can think you don't like their home and that because of that you can't sell it, right? Or you can't sell it for top dollar. So
I did a video recently about I lost a listing because Will, we really liked you. I thought I was listing the house. And but Ruth, his wife, Ruth just didn't think that you were very enthusiastic about our house. And this other agent came over and she just loved the house.
And again, the statistical probability is that woman asked a lot of questions and then followed up. Yeah, I love this too. By the way, guys, one of the most important questions you can ask on a listing appointment is when you first get there is, hey guys, could you share a little bit with me about what you really loved about this home living here? Because that really uncovers a lot of emotional stuff, right? Man, I used to love sitting out by that fire pit on a clear night, kind of thing. Yeah, man, that sounds really great. I'm going to showcase that in our listing, in our listing description. You get the idea. And by the way, one of the things that Dan taught me was that when you are able to establish connection with people, sometimes you don't even have to do a presentation. They just say, I'll take it. Really. I've had that happen many, many times, where, I would even get to the pricing part of the presentation. And I would say, guys, have you thought about price? John, we trust you. Put whatever price you feel is fair on this house. I didn't even do a presentation. And by the way, had I done that, I might have shot myself in the foot. It's so powerful when you establish a connection with people. It's remarkable.
Let me add another example. I was talking to our office manager, closing coordinator. Her husband's a pediatrician. Everyone loves him. When you go meet a doctor, the vast majority of people pick a doctor because they're down to earth. It's not because they've got the most education or because they diagnose quicker. Most people connect with a doctor because the doctor took time, sat down, asked them questions, didn't rush them. And when they say down to earth, all that means is I connected with that person. So a doctor who goes to school for 12 or more years, most people will pick a doctor. My friends who are physicians, the patients love them, not because of their depth of knowledge or anything else. It's all because they are nice, they ask questions, and they make a connection. That's the reason. And if you think about doctors that you like and doctors that you don't like, and you may have a doctor that's the most knowledgeable person, but if they bark at you, or if they say, well, this is wrong, I think this is going to happen, and they're not thinking about your feelings at all, you might walk out of that doctor's office and never go back. And that's how we are with healthcare professionals. So you can bet people that don't have insurance in the way. I mean, it's much harder to leave a doctor than it is an agent. You just never call the agent back. A doctor, you got to go get them switched in the system, find a new one, see if they take your insurance. But people, most of the time, love their doctor or hate their doctor by the way they connect with them. And are they cold or are they warm and empathetic? Am I wrong?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, they usually say, I really like him. He's so nice.
He's so down to earth.
Yeah, comes out. Yeah. I want to give you all, and guys, I took 10 years to master this stuff. Will and I are just giving you principles. But I think that if you take anything away so far, it would be number one is you fundamentally have to be focused on making that connection, not getting an appointment. That's number one. The only way you're going to get there is by asking questions. Do not, under any and all circumstances, confuse information for real connection.
100%.
That's really not going to serve you. Never answer a question that a prospect asks you without knowing what's behind that curtain, unless they ask you what time it is. If they ask you what time it is, say, well, that's a great question. Why did you ask me that?
Or what's the temperature?
Yeah. So I was just talking to a guy this morning, and let me just tell you this last one, which is number 5. And so important. He went out on a listing and he was competing, right? And he was competing with 2 other agents. To his credit, he was the last one in. The seller said to him, you know what? I've listened to 3 of you guys now, and you all pretty much sound the same. Why should I hire you? Right? Why should I hire you? And what the typical answer is, well, I sell $1 gazillion a year. You see that Mercedes out in the driveway? That's mine. And my wife is gorgeous, but you should see my mistress. You should hire me, right? They do a commercial. And by the grace of God, he got that listing because he was the last one in. That's what I think. That's why he got it. But, at the end of the day, you never answer a question like that. The question is, well, listen, I don't know whether you should hire me or not, but can I ask you a question? Well, what's that? Have I displayed all of the attributes and characteristics of an agent who can bring you top dollar? Have I done that tonight? Right? What are they going to say? No, they're going to say, yeah, pretty much. And I say, well, look, that's the answer. That's why you should hire me. If they say it on the phone before you met them, listen, well, I don't know whether you should hire me or not. I haven't had a time to see your home. I don't know what your goals are. I don't know what you're looking for in an agent, right? So when can we get together and talk about that stuff? Don't answer questions. Ask questions in response to a question. Find out what's behind that flipping curtain first. Fools run where an angel fears to follow. Go ahead, Will. I interrupted you.
No, if you learn anything from this little hour, it's that in real estate sales, especially when you're dealing with sellers.
And have we talked about scripts and dialogues? No, they have their place. Okay. But that is high school. Right? This stuff that Will and I are talking about are master's degree and doctorate degrees programs. Right? Scripts and dialogues have their place. I'm not dissing them. But again, a distant second to what we're talking about. You're never going to create connection by scripts and dialogues. They say this, you say that. They ask this, you tell them that. Good luck. And look, Will, does well over 100 units a year. I've done well over 100 units a year. And I'm not being braggadocious about either of us, but do you think we got there with scripts and dialogues? Do you think that's how it worked? No way.
No, and I did a whole lot of telling for a long time. And it's I lost more business than some agents take in a year because of my attitude and talking too much.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Mr. Yakety Yak if we're not careful,
Mr.
right?
Yeah. Anybody got any questions? Type them in the chat and we'll address them.
Or does anybody want to role play if you're
Well,
brave?
the problem is, John, and I'm a very transparent person. This is the first time I've used Zoom webinars. All of our meetings up to this point have been meetings. So everyone's face is on here. I didn't know what to expect with this. I was told to get the webinar program. Well, so now the problem is that no one's talking. They're all hidden. And I know everyone can hear us, but if anyone's got a question, I am able to allow you to speak. Let's
There is
see.
one in the chat.
I'm going to allow Christina to talk. Go ahead, Christina. Say it out. Christina, say it out loud.
Did you read it?
Yeah. Do we get to call Will Mr. Yakety Yak? Yeah.
I feel like I like that name.
Yeah.
I'll just put
That
you in
is
my
true.
comments.
That is true, by the way, that comic book.
Right. I'm a bull in a china shop and I've still sold 3,000 houses. So just goes to show.
Yeah.
Again, guys, I think that the question that we need to answer is how many commission checks is it okay to lose because we're telling people stuff instead of asking questions to find out what's behind that curtain. Really.
I heard one coach and he said, before, when you go on an appointment, a listing appointment specifically, you cannot say a word. You can't talk about anything until you ask at least 5 questions. You've got to ask them 5 questions before you're able to say, boo, about how long you've been in the business, how many homes you've sold, how big your company is, all of that. Here, Rebecca, I'm gonna actually allow you to talk about it. So Rebecca's on my team and she has a question. She wants to make a comment about a recent seller that we had. And by the way, Rebecca sells 30 to 35 homes a year. Rebecca, what were you going to say about the lady in North Royalton?
I just wanted to mention about listening and talking and motivation because she kept saying, I like all of you guys that I've interviewed. Remember, we had that conversation
Yeah.
and I kept saying to you, what do I do? How do I close her? Because I like everybody. Everyone can be my friend. And, it finally took me saying, well, there's a difference between listing agent and a friend, and I will be your friend and guide you along the way, but you also want me to be strong and be able to list your house and do what needs to be done. And I think you kind of guided me on that, Will, because it was really hard to kind of settle her down.
Yeah. Matt, let's see. How do you keep control of a conversation, ask questions when the seller constantly cuts you off and goes off topic? John, that's a very good question, Matt.
Yeah, well, look, at the end of the day, the short answer is simply this. We have to have these questions that we're going to ask people internalized so that we can rein people in when they wander. And Matt, I say this with a servant's heart. When that happens to us, typically it's because we don't have the questions with us. We don't have an MO of the exact questions to ask. And guys, till this day, I kid you not, if I'm going into any meeting of consequence, I don't care what it is, I have questions that I want to ask that individual about whatever we're talking about. I just had one this morning, by the way, with someone. It doesn't matter what it was personal, not business, but well, I guess it was kind of business, but I know exactly what I was going to ask this guy. So Matt, when we are, just take this with you. The key to success in this wheelhouse is abundant preparation, exquisite timing while we're there, and outstanding delivery. It's all about preparation, timing, delivery. It's difficult, Matt. I'm not saying it's easy, but when you are abundantly prepared, you can rein that stuff in pretty quickly. You really can.
And you can usually tell, like, if someone has a really strong personality and they love hearing themselves talk, then again, how do you keep control of the conversation when the seller constantly cuts you off and goes off topic? It's a hard one to do, but like, honestly, sometimes I look at that as a gift. Like, if they're going to behave that way now, because if they cut you off, they're probably also going to not trust your opinion. They're probably going to also going to want to pick the price and make all the decisions without any feedback from you on everything else. So you got to gauge the entire thing, because not everybody's a good fit. If they're just cutting you off because but you can tell that they're a generally good person and they just have bad manners, that's one thing, as opposed to someone who's they already know the answer. They're the smartest person in the room. Sometimes those people, you just can't help them. What do you think, John?
Yeah, well, I agree. And sometimes they're just trying to manage their own anxiety. But, at the end of the day, one thing just occurred to me is really important, guys. Oftentimes, when we ask a question, the prospect or the lead will give us an answer to a question that we did not ask. Okay. So, for example, Will, listen, I think that we need a price adjustment of about 2% here, and I think we'll be okay. Well, Will, I don't want to give the house away. Did we flip and ask the guy if he wanted to give the house away? No, we didn't ask that question. Okay. And so that's how people deflect. And what I always used to say, Will, listen, I probably didn't ask the question the right way. Let me try it again. Right. And I would ask the same freaking question. So often when I get into a spat with my wife, she's notorious for answering a question I didn't ask. I don't know if it's a guy-girl thing, but it's pretty prominent around here. So you always rein it in. And if you ask a question and you get an answer to a question you didn't ask, just circle back and say, Will, I don't think I asked the question the right way. Let me ask it this way. And you give them the same freaking question. Again,
right.
Flashing neon light. I'm in control here. You don't even know it. That's how good you have to be. This is brain surgery, guys. So, Will, you want to take us? You want to take us home?
Yeah. So, thanks. Hopefully you guys thought this was helpful. The bottom line is, ask questions, involve everyone, slow the process down, don't rush, don't have getting an appointment that be your number one goal. Because if that's your number one goal before you make a connection, you're going to lose business. I've done that before as well. All of these mistakes I have made deep into my career. I mean, this is my 39th year as a realtor. Deep into my career, I was doing this stuff left and right. John's had to shake me a few times over the years because I get so boisterous.
All right, guys, be well. Thank you for coming and listening to us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
See you all.